All right, thanks so much everyone for joining today's webinar, Branded versus Unbranded Search, how global brands can own the customer journey. So we've got some really great insights for you today in the webinar. First of all, this is based on a report that was written a couple of months ago now, but the data here is also very relevant because there's been an update during COVID times to understand how consumers search and how consumers search has actually changed during COVID times. So some really interesting data on consumer search itself, and also how they engage brands, so that global brands and also marketing agencies as well can actually understand how to help brands engage these consumers much better. So first of all, just to let you guys know, we have a webinar recording that we'll send out to you at the end. We also have a copy of the report that you'll get, and also a copy of the slides. So you're going to have a ton of content to go through right at the end of this. So let's just get started and introduce you to our super crew of marketing, the super marketing team at Uberall. First, there's myself, Brad Fagan. I am the Senior Content Strategist at Uberall. I wrote the Branded versus Unbranded Search report. I've also written Voice Search report, Reputation Management report. Some of those findings will be in the report today, so in the webinar today. So we've got a lot of stuff to unpack for you, some really interesting findings. Kelly is experiencing a few technical difficulties with her camera, but she's here with the audio. So Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Brad. I'm Kelly Benish, and I've worked in the industry for about 10 years, and I've got a background in SEO, hosting, traditional media, coaching, and also consulting. Kicking it over to Greg.
And the first thing you'll notice is the difference between my hair in the picture and my hair in the live image. Also the color of my beard and my glasses. That picture's about 17 years old at this point, kind of, believe it or not. So I'm like one of those people that only has one headshot and uses it way past the expiration date. I'm Greg Sterling. I've been around for a long time, covering and writing and researching about the local marketing, location-based media and marketing, small business, and multi-location brands. And I'm excited to be a part of this and looking forward to a fun discussion and hopefully a lot of questions from you guys. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll have time at the end to get to them. So back to you, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a lot of expertise here. So if you have any questions, really just think of them as we're going, write them down, and we'll be really happy to get to them at the end. We have some good time at the end for questions. So without further ado, let's get into the first slide here and talk a little bit about what you will discover on today's webinar. So first, we're going to look at the age of near me and why it's here to stay. We're also going to tell you a little bit about what near me is if you don't know, why global brands need to actually think local, especially at this time. Also, we're going to dive into how consumers find brands locally with some of that data I've been talking about, what COVID-19 has actually taught us about engagement, and then we're going to jump into, again, how you can actually use this information to increase visibility, engagement, and branded search. And I know, Kelly, you're very excited about this part.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited for you to showcase how unbranded search really trickles into results for visibility, engagement, and branded search. It's critical for marketers and brands to understand how all of these search channels influence each other and work in tandem together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just going to finish off by telling you a little bit about how you can create a near me brand experience and how that can influence global brands' visibility and engagement. So a lot to get into. But first, let's talk about what the age of why the age of near me is here to stay, and really dive into local search and the rise of searches with local intent. So first of all, let's talk about local search. So in the last decade or so, local search has actually become very important due to that little thing there on the screen to your left, the woman holding it, the mobile phone. And that's because mobile phones have allowed us to type in search queries into search engines and look for local businesses near me. And this local intent that's grown has also been pushed by Google to now take up about 50% of all local search traffic. And that's really important because of the high purchasing intent that comes with local search. But here I'll just ask Greg to jump in and talk a little bit about that 50% number, where it comes from, and where it comes from. Greg?
I thought when you said the little thing that she's holding in her hand, you're referring to the cup of coffee was responsible for the growth of local search, and it may well be. In fact, coffee is responsible for many things. So the 50% number basically comes from an internal Google presentation at a conference. Google has put out different numbers over time: 30%, 40%, 46%. And there are different ways to think about this, but basically, most transactions are fulfilled in the real world. Most commercial activity happens in the real world, and that's reflected in consumer intent when they're doing searches. And we'll talk more about this and how to think about local as we go forward.
And Kelly, can you just talk a little bit about the consumer angle in terms of how they search and engage locally with these local brands? Global brands?
Sure. So since Google makes up about 90% of global search volume, this is really a great representation of consumer behavior at the local level, where brands must compete for customers with immediate buying intent. It's really that demand-driven consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads us on to specifically near me searches and what is near me. So let's just talk a little bit about what is near me when we start off. Near me has grown a lot since 2014, as you can see. Also, this means there's been a lot of fragmented consumer search queries. Consumers don't search in a one specific way in a specific industry for a specific thing. Now that they understand that they have more options, that Google understands their search intent, when they put in a near me search, their search queries mushroom out and become far more specific. And that becomes a problem for locations and global brands with many locations to actually get found and become visible for these type of search queries. And we know that they've become more prominent as the years have gone on, but we actually also know that near me searches have actually only increased this year, even with the COVID pandemic as well. And Greg, I know that you have a little story here that a little anecdote that you want to share with us, just to show us, let us kind of get some color around what a near me search actually is.
Yeah, so it's a personal sort of Uberall story. So when I first started working for Uberall earlier this year, late last year, earlier this year, this near me brand experience discussion I was kind of skeptical of it. And I was in New York for a conference at the end of last year, and I did a search in my hotel for best breakfast near me without really thinking about it. And I went, I found a place based on the reviews, and then I walked from the hotel to that place, and there must have been 20 or 25 or more places I could have eaten there. In the old world, you would have sort of walked down the street or asked the concierge or whatever, and you could have eaten. I could have eaten at any of these places, but in fact, I went straight for the place that I found on my mobile phone prior to leaving the hotel. So these other places were essentially invisible to me, and it became clear in that moment that the brand experience, whether it's a small business or a multi-location brand, is the brand experience. The first touch point is this kind of near me search that people are doing online. So that was a kind of a moment of revelation. I wrote a blog post about it last year, my personal epiphany.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Go
yep.
Back to you, Brad.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Greg. So this is a quote that really speaks to, again, the consumer search behavior and how it's changing again to be more near me focused in 2020. And this is actually a quote from Google's global head of research and insights about 3 weeks ago in a Q&A, where he said that the world has shrunk and that we are seeing a rapid increase in searches, including near me. And why is that? There's also been an Accenture study that actually shows that 80% of consumers feel more connected to their communities since COVID-19, and that 88% also believe it will stay that way long after COVID-19 has ended. This speaks a little bit about or to the limited mobility that people, due to store closures, due to the fact that people have to stay inside, or that they're increasingly worried about their safety, that they're making more thoughtful journeys, that they're making more journeys locally to locations right in their direct communities. And this becomes a habit. And I think that people understand that, they were making local journeys before, but it's even become more important now that every journey is important, and that the search becomes very important, and then the offline engagement factor and getting the right information becomes really important. And I'd like to bring Kelly in now just to share something about local search, and in terms of your own personal experiences about this and interacting locally in your community recently.
Yeah, certainly. So I personally found myself actively supporting my local stores and community as COVID hit. It's really hard to ignore the appeals and the outcries on social media to help save some of the local historical restaurants and establishments in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live. So while convenient, I really like to stay away from ordering platforms such as Uber Eats, DoorDash, Chow Now even, and others that are going to then take a hefty percentage off the top and really out of the restaurant owner's pocket. So I like to really go old school and call them directly to place my order. And I try to do takeout and go pick it up directly from the restaurant at least 3 times a week right now.
Yeah, and that's really interesting as well in terms of multiple touch points, how consumers have multiple touch points, that they can there's traditional methods of making a phone call, but also there's the ability for that information to be online. So they're doing a search, they're finding maybe that a store's closed, and making a phone call. And we'll talk a little bit about more about that later. But first, let's just talk a little bit about branded and unbranded search. There's a question here: is it better to be known or found? Obviously, the answer is both. If you can be found first, for a branded search, that means somebody knows about the brand, but it also means that they probably like what they got the first time. But it's in terms of consumer behavior and how they search, mostly consumers are searching, conducting unbranded searches first. And there's this number from Google that says about 90% of consumers aren't sure which brand they actually want when they begin to search online. And again, a couple numbers here. 88% of all offline journeys start with an online search. That number differs depending on which study, but it's about the same wherever you find that number. And also 90% of worldwide retail sales still happen offline, or at least they did before the pandemic. So traditional consumer search behavior is to search online, and then it is to travel offline to a store location and then make a purchase. Again, Greg, bringing you in here. Can you talk a little bit about this 90% number, and perhaps what's been the impact of COVID on that number, and whether you think that post-COVID this is going to stay the same or go back to normal, where 90% of the retail sales will happen offline?
Sure. So I want to point out that this number, which is frequently quoted, doesn't include services. The majority of the U.S. GDP is services. So retail is a pretty substantial $4 to $5 trillion chunk, but services are far larger, and most, the overwhelming majority, probably well in excess of 90%, transact offline. So it's a much bigger number than this reflects. But obviously, we've seen enormous growth in e-commerce, new buyers coming online for the first time, new categories of products that people weren't buying online, and I think that will remain, and that's a global phenomenon. So the number will get decrease. That it won't be 90% anymore. It'll be 85% or 87% or something like that. But what's more interesting, I mean, coming off of the previous point, we're seeing people, there's a kind of a paradox where people are buying more stuff online, but yet they want to support their local communities. So they're trying to buy locally online at the same time, which sounds like an oxymoron or a contradiction, and it really isn't. So I think there's some really interesting new dynamics in the market, and we'll have to see how they play out. But definitely local remains at the center of consumer purchase behavior.
Yeah, and in order to try and understand how consumers are searching and engaging, we did conduct two studies. One, before really the COVID, the real fallout from COVID happened, and then one that was starting to measure the engagement, the search and engagement of consumers during that time specifically. So we can look at traditional search and then, what has happened in the last few months. And the study analyzed small businesses, but it also measured 22 global brands, which consisted of 48,000 locations from 4 markets, including the US. All to answer this one question: how do consumers find brands locally? Firstly, just want to quickly go into what a branded search is and what an unbranded search is. Won't take too long on this, but basically, a search is branded when a user searches for a business name in the Google search bar, and a list of results comes up. So, for instance, Starbucks near me, you can see a list of results there that doesn't necessarily include Starbucks only. Depending on the saturation of Starbucks locations, it could also include competitors. And then an unbranded search is a discovery search for products or services, where you can see on that second example there, it's unbranded, something like coffee near me, which again brings up local results. It could be small businesses, or it could be large brands as well, depending on the area as well. But the important thing to note also is that we put in searches for at the specific location level in unbranded as well, because a lot of the time when a consumer is searching specifically for a location level, they're looking for that location specific experience. So there's an example down below about Starbucks again. I will only go to the Starbucks from this day forward, beautifully crafted, best Starbucks ever, basically. So we want to get through the idea that a location level search is not always, specifically identifiable to the brand. That location level searches, or consumers engaging at the location level, are looking for specific experiences at that location level that may also connect to the brand, but that global brands need to also understand that the location level and the information a consumer needs is different. And Kelly, about this type of thing as well, are there any unbranded search trends that you can see happening lately, or specifically any examples of unbranded search trends that you can give me to provide a bit more, color around this?
Yeah, sure. And this is really from our other Near Me report, but I think during COVID times, it's really influenced the type of non-branded searches that have been executed. I've seen the emergence of home improvement searches grow really during COVID, as search like plumber near me would be more popular, or even restaurants open now. And I think those types of searches are really gaining traction with the emergence of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So let's look at the numbers. We've got some high-level numbers for you. Not going to go too deep into the data. If you want that, you can actually read the report. But let's look at unbranded searches for small businesses. First of all, 81% of all small business search online or visibility is for unbranded search. And as you can see there, for global brands, 58% of global brand search or visibility is actually unbranded. So a large portion of search is actually unbranded for global brands. And they often don't understand that a large portion of their search it comes at the location level, and it's for products and service categories not affiliated with that brand. So a lot of the time, it's hard to communicate that global brands actually need local search, and it's a really important part of how consumers actually engage and actually find them. Also, visibility is really important in branded search as well. As you can see, when we kind of break it down into industry, we can see that hospitality and travel has more branded search than unbranded. And we go right to the bottom there, and we can actually see that B2B has far more unbranded search than they have branded. They only have a 12% branded search. And it's interesting, the small business numbers actually match that up as well. So in the B2B specific category, there's not a lot of branded search going around there. There could be multiple reasons why this happens. It could be competition between large brands and small businesses at the local level. It could be honestly just the fact that maybe that industry itself doesn't have a lot of brand recognition. For instance, in the services category, if you're driving down the road and you're looking for a service station, gas station, You won't automatically put in a brand name. You might just say gas station near me. It really depends on a lot of factors, but it's important to understand how industries or niches themselves have different ways that consumers search for them. There might be a large amount of branded search saturation, or there might be none at all. And that's important to understand as well based on these categorizations. So we understand how consumers search traditionally and how they may be engaged, but what has COVID taught us about local engagement? And this one was super interesting. It's our most recent look at local engagement. What we found was that local engagement, total consumer engagements, actually went up in March, one of the times for great lockdown in Europe at least, and also we can see that effect also in the US. In a total engagement level, what we mean is website clicks, phone calls, and direction requests on GMB profiles. So at a total engagement level, we can see that people are still engaging, consumers are still engaging locally. And the reason for that is that obviously in times of crisis, as we've said, people rely on accurate information at the local level, at the store level specifically, and that helps them make their decisions. So for global brands that have maybe high level information at their website, it's really important that they understand that they also need to have really fast adaptable information at the store level as well. And if we break this information out into these three categories that I just talked about, driving directions, website clicks, phone calls, we can see during that March period where lockdown was quite high, there is a massive drop off in driving directions. Now, what happens when driving directions drop off, when consumers are obviously still searching the same way that they always do, which is locally? What actually happens is that they find another way to engage, and that way that they're engaging is by clicking on the website address on the GMB profile or making a phone call. And this could be for a number of reasons. Maybe their flights got cancelled and they need to make a call to understand what's happening. Maybe they're trying to get their money back. There could be a lot of different reasons this is happening. It's not all that they just want to make a purchase straight away and travel to the website. Obviously, we realize that, but it is important to understand that at the local level, when consumers are searching and that they can't travel directly to that location, then they might actually click on the website, go to the website, and maybe purchase a product online, do a click and collect. This speaks to the idea that we need to actually give consumers more options online and allow them to have a more seamless transition online to offline and have a more agile marketing approach to the way a local search is formulated and actually executed by these global brands with locations, thousands of locations around the US. And Greg, can you perhaps come in and speak a little bit about this? And maybe I know you touched on e-commerce before and how there's maybe like a opportunity for global brands to be visible for e-commerce searches that were maybe traditionally not their wheelhouse. Maybe talk a little bit about how search has changed and also local engagement factors in as well.
There's a ton of stuff going on here that we could talk a long time about. I mean, one of the interesting things is that consumers have become more dependent upon the internet than they've ever been, but the information online is questionable. So I think we're seeing a lot of phone calls in part because people are trying to verify that businesses are open for sure, and website clicks as well, because they're not entirely trusting of the information they're seeing on Google My Business, or Google Search and Maps, even though that's the primary information source and everything has to be there and has to be updated. But one of the interesting things going on now is that for some pure e-commerce searches, I used some examples in a blog post the other day, Dutch oven, wireless earbuds, hiking boots, you could go on and on. Things that might have been never considered local searches, even though ultimately most people do purchase those things in a store, you're starting to see Google show up with local packs. So a lot of searches where there's no geo modifier, no zip or postcode, no city name, no neighborhood name, you're seeing the local pack show up. And in fact, Moz did a study a couple of years ago in which they looked at over 1 million pages and found that almost 3/4 of those pages had some local feature on them. So Google is kind of hedging and trying to give people options both in terms of e-commerce and local information. And when you click through in some of the local packs, you know, you're getting a kind of hybrid presentation. Macy's, for example, you can click through to a hosted page that has store inventory and will allow you to buy things online. So we're seeing this kind of cross-pollination of online and offline now in new ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and now let's have a look at how you can increase visibility, engagement, and branded search. I know that Kelly said that she's particularly excited for this part. So am I. In order to be able to actually explain how this can, you know, help global brands, is really, it's nice to talk about search data, but giving accurate insights into how this happens and why this happens is also really important for us. So let's look into, you know, a bit more into the search data. Obviously, what we did was we actually looked at Uberall customer locations from the 6 months before we managed them into the 6 months after they were actually working with us, to identify, you know, the impact that a location management platform has on visibility, increasing visibility, and actually increasing consumer engagement as well. And what we found was that in the month 2 to 3 of working with Uberall, third-party platform, there was a 52% increase in visibility, and also after 6 months of working with us, there was a 100% engagement growth increase here. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, Uberall is the best in the world, but what we're trying to say here is that, you know, using a third-party platform is important for global brands. So a location marketing, location management platform helps visibility and it helps engagement. And we're going to speak a little bit about how, you know, Uberall helped that to happen. So we'll just move on to one of our customers, Total, just to let you know, how this all works and how location marketing kind of works and how it helps visibility. So for instance, Total, like I said, it's there before about gas stations. They are a gas station that perhaps traditionally people would be on the road driving. Maybe they put in a search for gas station, you know, near me, and they would find Total. But gas stations provide a lot more, you know, products, services than just gas. So for instance, car washes, you know, coffee, groceries, specific types of groceries, maybe, you know, chips or hot food or whatever it is. But there are products and service categories that global brands do that perhaps they're not being found for. And consumers conduct these type of NEMI queries. As I said, there's a mushroom of queries that are becoming more fragmented, and it's becoming harder and harder for locations locally to be found for these and gain visibility. So what happens is that when you use, you know, global brand, you know, puts its locations and uses a location marketing platform to manage that information, the structuring of that information means that they become visible for a lot more search queries. And that's how Total, for instance, was able to increase visibility on maps to 120% by becoming visible for these types of search queries, basically. And, you know, Kelly, can you just talk a little bit also about how impressions can translate to engagement?
Sure. You know, we work a lot with fuel retail specifically, and this is a segment, like Brad was saying, where we can really influence these searches. So for instance, some of the fuel retail stations that we work with, we can have a location within a location, essentially, where we have the forecourt fueling area, we've got the car wash, we've got Papa's Fried Chicken, the convenience store, the ATM, and the EV charging station. An increase to impressions like map views translates into engagements like clicks to call and also clicks to navigate to stores. And this becomes a direct stream towards increasing foot traffic and reaching new customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, maybe you can just touch on exactly the process with like a GMB profile in terms of how, you know, managing information on a GMB profile can increase and this type of visibility for brand locations.
Right. Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is if you've got your profiles fully claimed and optimized with images and video and, you know, appropriate categories and reviews, obviously you're going to do a lot better than somebody who is only partially optimized or hasn't claimed their listing. I mean, I think there's just a higher level of trust. There's a higher level of engagement. I mean, GMB, you know, one of the really fascinating things about Google My Business and Google Search and Maps is that it's become kind of a full funnel platform now. And so it's from discovery to, you know, booking at the bottom of the funnel. And every multi-location brand, every small business really needs to fully optimize their presence there. It's not gonna help you with SEO, with traditional SEO, but it will help you in the local pack, and it will certainly help you when consumers are doing these near me searches. There's a lot more to say, but that's sort of the short version.
Yeah, absolutely correct there. And when we look at moving from, you know, creating visibility for these, you know, large multi-location brands, when we move from converting visibility into engagement, you know, what is the key there? Let's look a little bit at some other data that we collected as well from another study of ours managing, you know, looking at how locations become or how locations get engagement by consumers looking at their reviews. So if we look at the graph on the left, we can see, you know, the engagement from the brand at the local level. Basically, how we found it is that the bigger the business, the worse the reply rate. So if you have, for instance, a global brand, they're going to be less likely to actually reply to a review than an SMB location would be. But the good news is that when you look at the right graph there, actually, the larger brands engage, the more engagement they get back. So perhaps a small business gets less engagement back from their reply rates, but an enterprise, an enterprise brand with multi-locations, actually, if they reply to just 3 out of every 10 reviews, they're going to almost double the engagement than if they answered just 1 in 10 reviews. So that actually speaks largely to the fact that, you know, consumers, if they see that a large global brand is actually, or you know, large enterprise brand is actually engaging with them locally at the location level on GMB, for instance, then they're more likely to trust that brand. They're more likely to, you know, go to that location and make that decision fairly easily and fairly quickly. And, you know, what we see is that when brands have no presence on these review platforms, that they actually, you know, don't get that engagement as well. They might get the visibility, but are they actually making those consumers choose them? Social validation is very important today for consumers to actually make the choice to engage brands. And that's really important to remember. So let's just give you a couple of tips on how you know, you can create a better brand experience for your clients or your global brand. First of all, a better brand experience actually means giving customers choice, and that's a really important thing because, you know, every consumer is different, and the more choice and the more seamless the online to offline journey is, the more you're going to be able to satisfy that search intent and be a brand that actually the consumer, the first time consumer becoming a customer, will actually want to come back and repeat that experience. And some of these you know, journeys here in terms of, you know, online order, offline pickup have become more important during COVID as well. You know, returning an online order to an offline store and then creating sort of a consistent experience online or offline actually presents that it's not a different, you know, it's not a different brand, for instance, that they found online, they traveled offline to the actual store. It's the same brand. They understand that they have the same messaging, that it's consistent, that the information is accurate, whether it be on the website, whether it be at that local level. And things like correct opening hours are really important as well. Greg, I know that you have a story of your own interaction with a brand that didn't actually have this seamless brand experience. Yes. Can you just go through this quickly to give an example?
So this is pre-coronavirus. Hopefully they've learned their lesson. So this was a Banana Republic. Online ordering, offline pickup, and returns are very, very important and will continue to be. But so I bought something from a Banana Republic outlet store, but it wasn't clear that this wasn't the regular Banana Republic site because it linked from the main site. So I bought this shirt I got it in the mail. It didn't really fit in the way that I anticipated, so I took it back to a store anticipating no problem. And then when I got there, it took me like an hour of arguing, and they wouldn't take it back because they said it's a completely different business unit, and they were citing all kinds of internal operational problems. And it was the most frustrating experience I've had in a long time with the retailer. And as a consequence, when their emails come through, I just delete them straight away and won't buy anything from Banana Republic again because it was such a bad experience. Now, for retailers to survive going forward, they're going to have to make it extremely convenient for consumers, and that kind of nonsense will have to go away very quickly, or they'll find themselves in bankruptcy court, as so many retailers are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you some more examples, just like Greg's one, well, not just like his one in a bad way, but this is actually a few global brands that have actually done a good job. Not customers of ours, actually. CarMax, one of the things that they did was that they actually trained 25,000 field staff on the CarMax brand experience so that their online search journey for their customers actually matched the offline journey, so that when a customer interacted with a location, they would get the same information, the same experience. The person in store would actually know and actually have that same information, that someone they might be dealing with on the actual website itself. And I will use Jim Liskey's quote here. You can channel my voice, the CMO of CarMax. We knew that to deliver a great seamless experience, that we would need the sales consultant in store to know as much as the customer experience consultant online. So it's really important, that brands think about this brand experience and trying to create that on that whole customer journey. Another example, David's Bridal. They actually went bankrupt because they didn't keep up with that new digital consumer. They went bankrupt last year. That they're actually still operating. They understood that they needed to be more visible on social media and review sites. So for instance, I think one of the things that their CEO said was that they relied on the fact that women would look into these bridal magazines, maybe rip out a page and then run into the store. But what they actually understood was that, they had maybe been left behind by the way that people, search online, that they have multiple touch points online, that for instance they engage with Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, that they're sharing photos, that they're on their social platforms, they're very engaged, and that maybe an e-commerce brand would pick that up, but that perhaps these locations, physical stores or whatever services as well, aren't really picking up on this, the way that an e-commerce would, and utilize these social platforms, these multiple touch points to actually engage with their customers and consumers to build their brand. Also, one of the things that their CEO did was that he read negative local reviews to actually inform himself about what the actual customers were experiencing at the local level, and then when he understood the negative comments, that he could actually inform himself a bit what was going wrong with their experience. But also here, there's an opportunity to reach out to these customers, as he says many times. A lot of nights I'll reach out to these customers myself. Replying to reviews is powerful because you have the opportunity not just to change the experience for that one person, but all people that are reading the reviews afterwards are going to have that experience change. They're going to see that brand as a brand that engages at that location level as well. So that's really important to note, is that reviews are powerful. Social validation is very, very powerful. Also, that big brands do need a location management platform. A third party is very important because if you have these thousands of locations, consistency and accuracy of information is super important. It builds branded search, it builds unbranded search, as you can see there, 140% increase in unbranded search on average across the first 6 months of working with us, and then 200% increase in branded search after 6 months. And that all speaks to the fact, obviously, is that you're getting more visibility, more engagement. Replying to reviews online then causes repeat customer journeys, so building more branded search as well, getting a better customer experience. And just to recap over what we've talked about, to keep it fresh in your brain before we get to the questions section, let's talk a little bit about the customer journey. This whole finding you, liking you, buying from you, recommending you, and then coming back. How do you do that? You increase your findability by being visible for more near-me searches. You use customer reviews to listen and improve. You engage with customers to raise trust. The more you engage, obviously, the more engagement you're going to get back. And then also creating that in-store experience that increases branded searches. That's all really important to creating this kind of seamless brand experience from online to offline, back online again, where they're giving the brand great reviews. So yeah, that's basically the journey. That's the insights that we've had from the report. And now we get to the questions section, the part I guess you've maybe all been waiting for. We'll look and see what some of the questions are here to start off with.
Before we do the
Oh, yeah.
do questions, I just want to make a quick comment about the CarMax example
Sure.
and the David's Bridal examples. So people have been talking about omni-channel and seamless experiences and that kind of thing for maybe a decade. The need to have a consistent brand experience across online and offline. But now with coronavirus, it's really become a kind of imperative. I mean, we've moved from a place where this was a sort of a nice to have to a must have, because consumers will not fool around with companies and retailers that are not delivering good experiences and convenience. It's just not going to be tolerated. And the David's Bridal example in particular is really a use case where he was doing exactly the right thing with reviews. I mean, people are very sort of jaded about reviews. Oh, we've got to get reviews because it helps with rankings. It's a local ranking factor, blah, blah, blah. And I think that he was really looking at this as customer feedback and actually used it as a way to improve the operation of the business, which is the right attitude toward reviews. So I just wanted to make those two quick comments. It looks like we have a couple of questions here.
Yeah, I mean, there's one for you specifically. So since you're already talking, it says, haven't I already factored in unbranded search with SEO, SEM strategy? Why do I need location marketing specifically? That's something for you to answer, Greg.
Well, I mean, you know, there's the whole sort of zero-click discussion where more and more of the page is taken up by components that are delivered by Google, carousels, shopping ads, for ads in the mobile context. And so you want to get into the local pack. Obviously, that's one of the few places above the fold that's organic, and you can't really do that without a local search, local listings, and review strategy. So that's the sort of short answer to that question. These are all complementary strategies: organic SEO, SEM, and local SEO.
Yeah, and also I guess, what about for the underdogs? This is for anyone really, but the small businesses who don't have a strong brand awareness, trying to survive in a competitive environment now post COVID. Do we have any unique recommendations on ways to stand out for unbranded search? I mean, Greg, maybe you can take this one first, and I can comment on it after.
And Kelly may have some ideas too, because she's definitely worked with small businesses. I think this is really tough as a practical matter. I mean, if you're lucky enough to work with an agency that can do something on your behalf, you're in a better position. But most of these very small businesses don't have the money for that, so they can fully optimize their Facebook and Google My Business profiles. You can do that on your own. You can try and generate awareness through other channels, through email, through social media. And if you can do that, that can help with branded search. Yelp is very important in the US. So that's another place to claim and optimize your profile. So you want to be covered on Google, Facebook, Yelp, Instagram, potentially, if it's relevant to you. And then use other channels like email if you have a customer list, to generate awareness or to stimulate demand, and then hopefully people will come back and search directly for you. You can also do certain kinds of ads. You can experiment with local services ads, which are Google ads, and those drive phone calls and messages and now bookings. Those can work very well and can be cost effective, but it's a big challenge for sure.
Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't actually.
Yeah, I just have one thing that I perhaps want to say about that, and that's also that there was an example of and again, going back to the coffee chain, but this is one example that I got given, was that there was one coffee chain that was competing against a very large global brand in an area because they were, replying to their reviews a lot. And there are a lot of factors that make up, ranking in the local pack, but they'd done very well because they, replied to basically every one of the reviews that came in from their customers, and they replied very quickly to those reviews. So they were getting, obviously, good review ratings are important too in terms of, social validation, but they were actually, ranking within that specific area for search higher than the global brands. And I mean, this social validation factor is really important for small businesses because, back in the dark ages, global brands could, rest on their brand association. A consumer would walk into a store and they would say, I'm really happy with this. I know exactly what I'm going to get. That's why I'm shopping at the location of this large brand, because I know them. But now, we don't need to know that. You can get this validation from a small business. You can look it up on you can look up their GMB profile. You can see that they have a 4.8 rating or whatever rating they have, and trust that they're going to have a good brand experience by a good local experience by looking into those reviews, seeing what consumers have actually searched, actually written about them, and then understand if that's for you, and then if those reviews actually are specifically answering your search intent, which is really important for small businesses, I think, to really double down on their reviews.
One quick.
Yep.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. One quick final comment. Absolutely right. I mean, if you deliver a better service, you'll get the benefit of that, and consumers are really, as we discussed earlier, are really rooting for small business. They want to preserve the unique character of their communities. They want to shop from local businesses rather than big chains if possible. Nextdoor is another site that I neglected to mention. Nextdoor can be very successfully used depending upon your category. They have ads now, but they also have a lot of organic tools, and that's another one to check out for small businesses.
Oh, really interesting. Thanks, Greg. This one's a question for Kelly. How should agencies and third parties pitch or offer location marketing services to brands?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to shed some light on that, we work exclusively through our partner network in North America. So from those learnings, I have a specific enterprise sales expert really dedicated to supporting our partners in their pitches and doing anything from a four-legged sales call to providing marketing collateral under that white label. So all of those things are needed, right? What we found is through our white label solutions, we have to make sure our partners have enough margin for resale of those solutions to be profitable. And you also need a scalable solution, obviously, when there's thousands of locations where really those redundant tasks are automated and the bits of the product and service that need a human touch for quality or validation are touched by an actual person. The packages that are provided to the brand or offered to the brand really have to provide value and touch enough channels to make a global to hyper local impact on each location for the brand, and they really have to stick to their needs. So many times we'll actually train our partners in best practices behind product optimization. So for near me optimization, for example, through the platform, such as including the neighborhood or the district in the short and long description of the listings, or even using our Google Q&A area of our Engage product to optimize for local search with targeted keywords. It varies, but we typically coach them through that whole process.
Yeah, really cool, really interesting. And again, let's say with you, Kelly, if you have a business already struggling due to COVID, that's ready to maybe discontinue their location marketing service, what are the implications of doing so? I.e., how might you attempt to retain the business?
And when you say retain the business, you mean keep the business afloat while they're temporarily closed?
This is the partner asking how to retain the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Typically, we'll coach them on how to optimize and just basically, in giving them a little bit of relief, we created a custom product called Essentials to support our partners over COVID times when their clients would go to cancel because they were, completely out of funds or in a worrisome spot. But stores are really at an advantage if they have good customer experience and service during that time. And then also those retailers and those sellers must be visible at every stage of the purchase journey. They can also use loyalty programs, and as Greg mentioned earlier, the omni-channel convenience is really helpful during that time.
I mean, I would add to that. I think you maybe need to work with them on the on billing, and their budget.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I think, the most obvious thing, right? Give them a little bit of flexibility, help them to temporarily close if they are a business like related to salons or direct customer facing like a restaurant. And then also give them guidance if they're a restaurant on how to change their platform to a little bit of e-com elements like ordering food out and creating a link on their site.
One of our partners has asked for some data on average lift that you see before and after actively managing business locations. And and Brad pointed this out in some of the earlier slides. There is a palpable, significant improvement in visibility, especially for these discovery searches where the brand isn't mentioned. If you're actively managing location, and then also with review management. But for a struggling small business, it's hard to it's very challenging. I mean, I think there are a lot of small businesses in the United States that are really struggling, and this is a difficult problem, and I don't think there's an easy answer. I mean, I think there are a lot of arguments that you can present to them that are valid, but you ultimately probably have to work with their budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got one more question here as well. What are some examples of search keywords that customers use when making local or immediate purchases that businesses should optimize for? Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. There's been a massive growth in, like I said, these like kind of more specific keyword searches. Obviously, it's not just car dealership near me, plumber near me. This obviously near me search is very important, but consumers understand now that they have a lot of demand type queries. So for instance, they could say, again, taking the plumber reference, plumber near me open now, or I guess ready to, maybe that's a bad example, but coffee shop near me open now, or these type of queries, open today, open tonight, have grown by I think it was something like 900% in the recently, I think it was 2018 that study was conducted. But the important thing to note is that searches have become a lot more immediate. That when these near me searches are conducted, there's like a high purchasing intent, especially obviously with local. That within 24 hours, obviously, as has been touched on, a lot of these journeys will actually turn into store visits, and people are looking for these. Obviously they're either walking around the street trying to put one of these search queries in, or they're in their car wanting to find, like I said, a gas station. So ranking or thinking about local is actually really important because of that high intent. Thinking about how you can optimize or how you can get more visibility and engagement is really important because of that intent that near me has for it. And yeah, there's another question here for Greg. What are some other actionable tips that you can provide for retailers recovering from COVID?
In the last couple of minutes, I'll give a comprehensive soliloquy about retail preparedness for the post-COVID era. Again, this is a very long topic. This was a webinar in itself that we did both in Europe and the US, and it's on our website, I think. I think that the conceptual answer to this is you have to provide convenience to the customer. So companies like Best Buy, the electronics and appliances retailer in the US, are doing and Target are doing a good job. Best Buy in particular, although their phone service is not so great, but you know, you've got buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup. They've got virtual service appointments. You can consult with somebody in the store via video. You know, there are a lot of retailers are trying to innovate around bringing the store experience online. You know, Zoom calls, Google Meet calls. There are probably tons of examples of this, but you have to give the customer convenience. You know, extending your return policy. There's a lot of things that go toward. You know, I was talking to eBags yesterday, and they're an online luggage retailer, and they're offering augmented reality product, you know, elements, so you can spin the product around. It's like the 360 views. They're trying to bring the store experience or context to the digital customer, and you know, you just have to make it easy for people and safe for people to get the product. But you've got to assume, at least for the foreseeable future, it's mostly going to be buy online, pick up in store. Not a lot of the traditional browsing and shopping, at least in these hard hit COVID states. But there's, you know, go to the website and look at that webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some great information. Obviously, the studies there too, and you know, like we've said before, that there's a real need to become agile at this time, and the businesses obviously that do adapt that agile approach, that, you know, maybe perhaps haven't focused so much on online and maximizing that online search. Really important for them to do so and to really adjust, possibly, you know, quicker than they might to technology and how things are changing and how the consumer search is changing as well at this time. Okay, yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for attending again. You know, at the end of this, obviously, as you go offline, I will send you the survey, the recording, and you've got you know, the webinar slides as well. And yeah, a ton of stuff coming your way. Yeah, actually, we have a survey here for you to fill out at the end, just to let us know how we've done, and please tell us what we could change and do better for the future. But you know, thanks so much for joining. Have a great day, and obviously, yeah, we'll see you again soon. So bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.